Hey everybody, I have read your case studies this morning and this afternoon and have provided feedback to you in the rubric. This is one of those assignments that's pretty straightforward. It's almost always very clear if you've read the case and what your analysis is, so that makes my job a little bit easier. Plus I enjoy it more because then I can just focus on what your insights and thoughts were. I really enjoyed your perspectives about this and how many of you really took the time to think about every aspect of this case that involved this elderly woman's health care and the lack of health care as well as the lack of supervision of that care. Lots of great insights. Your classmate Mason, I think, did an especially good job in her writing of the court's decision and tucking that in with the biblical worldview. Mason wrote that the Supreme Court of Virginia took all the evidence and testimonies into account when convicting Correll. She was rightfully and fairly convicted. Acts which result in injury or harm can result in civil penalties, but they also have potential to be criminally tried. Correll was criminally tried, convicted, and required to serve jail time. Psalms chapter 71 verse 9 states, "Do not cast me off in the time of the old age. Forsake me not when my strength is spent." Correll did not care for her mother in her old age or in her weakness. The Bible explicitly states that elders are to be cared for, especially by their family. In cases of elder abuse and or neglect, when there is evidence beyond a reasonable doubt, it's important to convict the defendant. I think Mason did a really nice job of specifically completing a really nice biblical integration in context with the content that you all have read related to Ms. Correll's case. It's so important for us to always be thinking about, from a nursing standpoint or a healthcare provider standpoint, how do we look out for the underdog? How do we take care of the vulnerable? Who is their voice? Our standards of practice, if you're in nursing, come from multiple organizations, especially when we have a code of ethics, and all of those call us to be advocates for those that are in our charge, for those that we are required to care for. So I appreciate Mason's thoughtfulness in applying this, and so many of you did very similar integrations as well as thoughtful analysis of the case. From an APA standpoint, I just want to touch on the importance of understanding how to discern a scholarly reference. You're going to have to go into the Jerry Falwell Library and go into the online databases to find scholarly resources. You want to use articles that are published in peer-reviewed journal articles, and that's an element that you can pick when you go into the databases to select the topic that you're interested in. So you're going to pick something that is peer-reviewed. You're also going to only include articles that have been published in the last 5 years. Anything older than that is likely kind of dated and aged. So you want to use information that is as current as possible, and we look for articles that have been published in the last 5 years. You want to make sure that the article that you are citing is practically relevant. So if you are writing a paper about the abuse of elderly, then it would be important to use topics and articles that are related to the abuse of elderly. It would not be appropriate to use a tangential article, let's say about child abuse. Whereas they both generally cover abuse, one is very specific to an elderly population and another is very specific to the population of the pediatrics. Make sure that when you're pulling articles that they're relevant. Also be aware that sometimes when we use international journals, there could be some cultural differences in how something is being analyzed using the healthcare system within the United States versus a healthcare system or a healthcare process that's outside of the United States. Just always make sure you're using an apple and an apple to compare and to support, not an apple and an orange or an apple and a car. Make sure that they're at least in the same bucket. When we think about next week, you're going to do the same thing that you've done this week. You're going to give a good summary, a good analysis, and then what your thoughts are about a case. The case next week is, for me, a little bit more difficult from an emotional trigger standpoint, because this case is about the neglect of a child that was left in the care of a sitter. So I want you to be very thoughtful about your process as you read that article, and make sure you continue to do an analysis. From an APA standpoint, I want to remind you that your discussion boards in any course in a graduate program should not be attached as files. They should be written into the body of a discussion board. And folks, know that sometimes when you're in a Word document and you you copy into the discussion board within Blackboard, it can look a little wonky. There are tips that are available online to help you sort through that. The best suggestion is when you copy in that you copy just the content, not the text, and then you go through the body of your discussion board and you correct formatting and spacing. One of the primary suggestions is to open the discussion board comment field and type directly in there. I have a hard time with that just because I'm not a great typer, so that space feels very confined. I like copying from a Word document, but I also know that I'm going to be copying and then I'm going to be adding my italic font or addressing any spacing issues when I copy it over. Just be thoughtful about not attaching files. Attaching files, a lot of people are very uncomfortable downloading files. Sometimes the files don't download, and when it's a discussion board, it's disruptive to the flow of a discussion. It's like sitting and having a conversation with someone and saying, hold on a minute, you get up and you go to another room and you call them. It's jarring. So we want you to put that content in the discussion board post in the actual field. See if I've got anything else I want to say. In-text citations. From an APA standpoint, when you do in-text citations, it is so important that if there are references in the body of your if there are references in the body of your paper, that you have cited them in the body of your work. And know that the in-text citations that are used, instead of citing the author and the name of the article and everything in a sentence, you're using in-text citations, that when you cite one and two authors, that you're going to put their names with a date as in-text citations. When you cite authors, if there's a group of authors that have 3, 4, or 5 authors, the first time you cite them as an in-text citation, you list all of those authors, comma, and the date that article was published. And then those are in parentheses. The next time you cite the identical set of 3, 4, or 5 authors, then you move to the et al. Format, where you post the first author, et al., comma, and the date. But know that with 3, 4, and 5 authors, that the first time and the second time you use them, they're different. And that always seems to be kind of a catch point to try to remember. When you use 6 authors or more in the body of a paper as an in-text citation, it's always that first author, et al., comma, and the date within parentheses. I know that this can feel, especially if this is the first course that you're trying to figure out APA, it's like, how many rules are there? Well, there's a whole book on them. So I know that you're trying to sort this out, but progression and improvement needs to be seen as you move through the course. We're kind of at that halfway point. If you're struggling with APA and this is just either you're not sure what to do with it or you're not sure how to use the resources, please touch base with me. This is especially important if you're going to maintain enrollment in one of the graduate programs like nursing that does do APA. It doesn't go away, and it becomes more complex as you move through the program. So now is the time to address any learning gaps or opportunities that you have. I think that is it for me for this week. Know that I am here. Remember that the Ask the Professor link is there for the general, the who, what, where, when, how, logistics types of questions, and I do want you to be using that so that you can share information with your peers as I'm replying, so you're not all asking the same thing. Know that anything personal to you, either to related to your grade or your own experience, that I'm here. Send me an email and I'm happy to talk with you. I hope wherever you are having a great week. I am in Roanoke, Virginia, and it has gone straight from spring to summer. We had torrential rains, and now it's 95. And as you can see from over my shoulder, Miss Gracie has said no thank you to going outside and playing. That has been where her little furry butt has been parked all day. Clearly she is not a fan of the heat. It must be the whole fur coat thing. Let me know how I can help you. If I don't hear anything, I'm going to look forward to just reading your case for next week as it's posted next week. Y'all have a good week. Take care.